kids, where are you? It's time for all the art to tell stories.
Chapter 1. A Special Cat. Cleo was not an ordinary cat. She had sharp green eyes that seemed to see more than the world around her, and an uncanny ability to find her way, no matter the situation. Her owner, Mrs. Potts, often said, "Cleo, you're the cleverest cat in the village." Mrs. Potts lived in a cozy cottage at the edge of Willowbrook, a small village surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Cleo loved exploring the meadows, chasing butterflies, and perching on the old stone walls. But her favorite thing was watching over Mrs. Potts, who was growing older. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. One afternoon, as Cleo napped on the windowsill, she noticed dark clouds rolling across the horizon. The air grew heavy and a strong wind rattled the shutters. Cleo jumped down and padded to Mrs. Potts, who was knitting by the fire. "Oh, what's the matter, Cleo?" Mrs. Potts asked, noticing the cat's restless pacing. Cleo meowed and pawed at the door. Just as Mrs. Potts stood to investigate, a loud clap of thunder shook the cottage. The storm had arrived. Chapter 3. Rising Waters. Rain poured down in sheets, drumming against the roof. Mrs. Potts lit a lantern, and Cleo sat beside her, ears twitching at every sound. Hours passed, and the storm only worsened. Streams of water began creeping under the door. "Oh dear," Mrs. Potts murmured, peering outside. The garden was submerged, and the nearby brook had turned into a raging river. The water was rising fast. Cleo jumped onto the windowsill and stared out into the night. She could sense danger. Chapter 4. A Hidden Path. Cleo leapt down and nudged Mrs. Potts' hand with her head, then ran to the door, meowing urgently. "You think we should leave, Cleo?" Mrs. Potts asked, hesitating. Another crack of thunder, and the sight of water lapping at the doorstep. Mrs. Potts grabbed her coat, a small bag, and the lantern. Cleo darted ahead, leading her out into the storm. The wind howled and the rain stung their faces, but Cleo pressed on, her tail high. Instead of heading toward the village, Cleo took a different route. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Passage. Years ago, Mrs. Potts had mentioned an old path that led to higher ground, but it had been unused for decades and was nearly forgotten. Cleo, however, seemed to know exactly where to go. She guided Mrs. Potts along the faint trail, her green eyes glowing in the darkness. The path twisted and turned, but Cleo never faltered. Mrs. Potts followed, her boots squelching in the mud. "How do you know this way, Cleo?" she wondered aloud. Chapter 6. Obstacles and Determination. The journey was not easy. Fallen branches and puddles blocked their way, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. At one point, a large tree had collapsed across the path. Mrs. Potts hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Cleo darted under the branches, finding a narrow gap for Mrs. Potts to crawl through. "Goodness, you're clever," Mrs. Potts said, brushing off her coat as they pressed on. Chapter 7. The Safe Haven. After what felt like hours, Cleo led Mrs. Potts to a clearing at the top of a hill. Here, the ground was dry, and the storm seemed less fierce. In the distance, the faint lights of the village shimmered. Exhausted but relieved, Mrs. Potts sat on a fallen log. Cleo climbed onto her lap, purring softly. "You've saved us, Cleo," Mrs. Potts said, stroking her fur. Chapter 8. A Hero's Welcome. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, and villagers arrived to check on Mrs. Potts. They were amazed to hear how Cleo had found the hidden path and led her to safety. "Cleo, you're a hero!" one of the neighbors exclaimed, scratching the cat behind her ears. Cleo basked in the attention, but stayed close to Mrs. Potts, her green eyes watchful as ever. Chapter 9. A New Beginning. The storm had caused significant damage, but the villagers banded together to repair what they could. As for Mrs. Potts, she decided to move to a safer part of the village, closer to her neighbors. Cleo, of course, went with her. She quickly adapted to their new home. She still roamed the hills and meadows, but always returned to watch over Mrs. Potts, ready for any challenge that might come their way. Chapter 10. Cleo's Legacy. Word of Cleo's bravery spread throughout Willowbrook, and she became a local legend. Children loved to hear the story of the clever cat who had saved her owner during the great storm. Years later, a small plaque was placed near the old hidden path, commemorating Cleo's heroic act. It read, "In honor of Cleo, the clever cat whose courage and instincts saved the day." And so, Cleo's story lived on, a testament to the bond between a cat and her owner. Chapter 1. The Enchanted Stream. Deep within the Coralwood Reef, hidden from human eyes, lay the Sapphire stream, a magical waterway with healing properties. Its shimmering waters had the power to mend broken shells, cure ailments, and even restore life to withering plants. The stream was protected by a young mermaid named Neria, who had sworn to guard it after her mother's passing. Neria was a curious yet determined mermaid with silvery hair that matched the gleam of the stream, and a heart filled with a deep love for the ocean. She understood the importance of the stream, not only for her underwater community, but also for the balance of marine life in the surrounding seas. Chapter 2. A World in Need. One day, as Neria swam through the coral gardens near her home, she overheard a pod of dolphins speaking in worried tones. Fishermen from the nearby human village were becoming increasingly desperate. Their leader, a man named Garrick, had fallen ill with an incurable sickness, and his followers believed the mythical Sapphire stream might hold the cure. Neria's heart sank. The waters of the Sapphire stream were fragile. Even a small disruption could strip them of their healing powers. She swam back to the stream, her thoughts a whirlwind of worry and determination. Chapter 3. The First Encounter. The next morning, Neria spotted a group of humans exploring the shallows near the stream's hidden entrance. Among them was a young boy named Finn, Garrick's son. Unlike the others, Finn seemed hesitant and curious rather than greedy. Neria cautiously revealed herself to Finn, warning him of the danger humans could bring to the stream. Finn, surprised but unafraid, promised he only wanted to help his father. Sensing his sincerity, Neria agreed to show him a safer way to use the healing waters. A single vial, carefully collected, could work wonders without harming the stream. Chapter 4. Betrayal. Though Finn kept his promise, his companions were less trustworthy. That night, a band of poachers followed Finn back to the village and overheard his conversation with Garrick. Believing they could exploit the stream for profit, they set out to capture Neria and take control of the waters. Neria, sensing danger through the whispers of the currents, prepared defenses around the stream. She enlisted the help of her sea creature friends: glowing jellyfish, defensive crabs, and even a protective eel named Vero who patrolled the waters. Chapter 5: The Siege of the Stream. The poachers arrived with nets and traps, their boats casting dark shadows over the reef. Neria and her allies fought bravely. Vero sapped nets with his electric charge, while the jellyfish formed a glowing barrier to deter intruders. However, the poachers were persistent. In the chaos, Neria was captured, and the poachers began siphoning the water from the stream. As the stream weakened, its glow dimmed, and the surrounding coral began to wilt. Chapter 6: Finn's Choice. Witnessing the destruction, Finn confronted the poachers, pleading with them to stop. He released Neria from her bonds and helped her restore some of the stream's flow. But the damage was severe. Neria explained that the stream's magic came from its connection to a rare sapphire crystal buried beneath its source. If the crystal was disturbed, the stream might never recover. Finn, feeling responsible, offered to help protect the crystal. Together, they devised a plan to drive the poachers away for good. Chapter 7: The Final Stand. With Finn's guidance, Neria and the sea creatures lured the poachers into a labyrinth of coral where their boats became stuck. Meanwhile, Neria used her voice, a gift inherited from her mother, to summon a powerful tidal wave, washing the poachers back to shore. Finn ensured the vial of healing water reached his father, who recovered quickly. Garrick, grateful and humbled, promised to spread word of the stream's importance and the need to leave it untouched. Chapter 8: A New Guardian. Though the stream's glow had dimmed, its magic was not lost. Neria, with Finn's help, replanted coral and sang songs of renewal, gradually restoring its vitality. The bond between the human village and the underwater world grew stronger, with Finn acting as an ambassador between the two. Neria remained the stream's guardian, but she was no longer alone. Finn often visited, bringing news and offerings of peace. Together, they ensured the Sapphire stream would remain a source of healing and hope for generations to come. Epilogue: A ripple of hope. The Sapphire stream shimmered once more, its waters flowing brightly and freely. Neria gazed upon it, knowing her mother's legacy lived on. Above the waves, Finn and his father worked to educate others about the importance of preserving nature's treasures. And deep within the reef, the stream whispered a melody of resilience, its magic a testament to the harmony between land and sea. If you like our stories, please like, subscribe, and turn on the little bell so you won't miss exciting stories every day. You are also welcome to share it with family and friends to listen to the story together. Love you.